Welcome back to Becoming is Messy, the podcast where we normalize the twists, turns, and unexpected detours that shape who we are becoming. Today's conversation is one I'm deeply excited about because it sits right at the intersection of courage, vulnerability, and the power of saying the thing, even when you're not sure how it will land. We're talking about estrangement, reconciliation, and what happens when you choose honesty over avoidance, not to control the outcome, but simply to live fully aligned with yourself. This episode is a beautiful reminder that becoming yourself doesn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes it means looking back. We're, this episode is sits right in line with the P in our imperfect level up framework. Pass it on. Pass it on isn't about teaching lessons from a pedestal. It's about sharing what you've learned while you're still learning. It's about choosing courage so someone else feels less alone. I am so honored to welcome today's guest, Amy Weinland Daughters. Her story models what it looks like to pass on truth, vulnerability, and repair, even when the outcome is uncertain. Amy is a keynote speaker, consultant, and the best selling author of You Cannot Mess This Up, Dear Dana, and The Lost Art of Connecting. Her work explores family estrangement, reconciliation, and the transformative power of reaching out, often with a handwritten letter when everything in you wants to stay silent. What I love most about Amy's work is that it doesn't promise tidy endings. It honors the bravery of trying, the healing that happens in the attempt, and the freedom that comes from showing up as your whole self. Amy, welcome to Becoming is Messy. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Megan, and that may be the best and most thought-provoking intro I've ever gotten, so I appreciate that. Now I almost wanna twirl around in my chair and let that marinate for a second.
Oh,
So
oh,
thank
thank you
you.
so much. That means a lot to me, and I will send that to you, so you'll have it in written word and be able to also use it yourself if you would ever like to.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, I am excited to have this conversation. Been looking forward to it for a while. This is actually the first interview I'm doing in the new year, so it feels great to start with such a great topic. For our listeners, help us set the stage and share a little bit about your current season. What's happening in your world right now?
Right, well, I'm a I did not come into writing as a profession on purpose, so, but I am working on a 3rd book, and I'm also continuing to explore the power of handwritten letters and notes. It's something I cannot get away from, and not that I would want to, but I find that every season I find the best version of myself in
Mm.
practicing that daily, and I think especially in our divisive culture that we all grapple with as human beings with a heart, it's really given me, something to do that's so hopeful on a daily basis that I think it's kept me grounded and centered, and it may be the best gift I ever got that I didn't ask for or think I needed.
Wow, that is powerful, and I love the idea. I mean, I hope that for all of us that we continue to get to meet the best version of ourselves. Like, what a great philosophy and thing to experience. How cool is that? So now walk us back to some of the prior versions of yourself. Every becoming story has its own messy path. What were some of the twists and turns that have led you to where you are today?
Right, and, it's funny in listening to your work and then listening to, just thinking about your intro, both my books have something to do with, revisiting something in the past
Yeah.
and maybe not intending to take great steps forward because of that, and that's all been about writing and sharing for me, but I didn't come into that space intentionally, and I think that's a great story to share because I think a lot of us feel stuck, and I listened to your last episode, and we can feel stuck and like, "What are we doing, and what are we gonna do next?" And that's a scary thing, and so I share my story with that in mind. I have a business degree, and I was in the purchasing world for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, and then my husband's job was like, "Why don't y'all we have an opportunity in the United Kingdom." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, that sounds cool." And so in doing that, I put my career on hold to go over for 3 years. And I didn't realize, and this sounds ridiculous, but I was so excited about the adventure. But, you know, being a full-time and a mom and a full-time worker, I didn't realize the silence that was gonna happen when I got in a space where I wasn't going somewhere for 9 hours a
Yes.
day. And I was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
this is a lot of time. What am I gonna do?" And so almost out of desperation, I went and took history classes at a university. Like, I tried to do all those things we list. I was in my late 30s, and I was like, "What am I gonna do?" And then I'd always written on the side. I thought my emails at work were profound about the company picnic or about Chardonnay or whatever I was writing about. And so I'd always written short stories. So I just started writing, and it was really almost out of desperation. And by the time we got back to the States, I had created this space for myself where I had replaced part of my income, had another kid. And by the time that was over, I had a full time gig writing. And, that led to my first book where I thought I will write a funny book about sending myself back in time to my own childhood and it'll be hilarious. Then I realized if you're going and so it's a the my first book is basically a memoir wrapped up in the tortilla of time travel. So
Mm,
you're going to like I had the creative license to you know, about 95% of it's truth based on my memory as a child. But basically, I travel back to my childhood home as a 40-something-year-old, a 50-something-year-old, and I witnessed my 10-year-old self and my parents at my same age for 36 hours at Thanksgiving. And I thought, "Oh,
mm.
this is gonna be like the Sears catalog explodes," and, like, it's so hilarious, like, all the funny thing, like the smoking and the bad
Yeah.
clothes and the gold chains, but what it turned out to be, Megan, was if you're going to revisit your child self, and that's such a compelling psychological, exercise, but I didn't really think of that until I wrote the actually did the writing of the book, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a catharsis," because I went and
Mhm.
refound myself, and
Yeah.
talk about messy. I mean, it was so messy, and you talked about writing a memoir in our pre-conversation. Writing a memoir is
Yeah.
messy, and you're going to have to decide what to include, what not to include, and be reacquainted with memories and perceptions that are very uncomfortable. But that process of writing that book and sharing the writing of the book with my family and the rest of the world was hugely messy, but it had the impact on me where I started writing that book as one person, and at the finish line, I was a whole 'nother person.
Wow. Yeah, I resonated with so much that you just said. The one thing I wanted to say was that I mentioned earlier the P in my level up framework. So that's the one I kind of tied to this episode. What you just described was our second competency, which is examine your childhood as an observer. And so,
Wow.
as I'm helping kind of coach people, or when I do public speaking, the framework that I use, the first step is really tapping into your inner voice and kind of discerning that between that and your inner critic. But then the next one is that going backwards and being able to just remove yourself and think of like the children in your life today that you love most, and think of yourself as those children. Think of that level of love and look back through that lens as you look back and just kind of bless your family with a lens of love and compassion as you do that work. And for me, that was just, that's what helped me get through the book because I feel like if I had done it in my 20s through a cloud of shame, yeah, I don't
Right,
think I could have gotten through it, right? You need that compassion for every player in your past, I feel like.
right, and I think that's amazing, that connection between the what you work with people and then my
Yeah.
accidental,
Yeah, I loved
trek
that.
back in time, and I think one of the biggest
Yeah.
things that came out of that was letting everyone, including myself, off the hook. Because in
Yep.
imagining myself back in time, I was like, "Wait, they're just trying to do the best that they can, just like I am in my real
Yes,
life, just like I was there. Everyone is just trying to do the best they can, and they
that's
are
right.
flawed,
Yeah.
messy, beautiful, flawed, wonderful human beings, and amen to that, because that lets
Yeah.
you off the hook too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, the whole thing, becoming is messy. That's essentially what the whole idea is that we're all messy. Let's just own the mess and be able to talk about it so we can heal from it and not let it hold us down. I'm wondering, let's stick backwards a little bit, as you went through that exercise and you're looking at your past, what were some of the themes that just started to kind of take hold just by being that observer and looking backwards at your family life. Oh, I lost you for a second. Oh, I can't hear you. Let's see. Can you still hear me?
There, I'm is that better?
There you are. Yes, yes,
Okay.
there you
S
are. Now I hear
sorry
you. Yeah,
sorry
yeah.
about that.
That's okay. That's all
No,
right.
no, I had a like many people do, I had a difficult relationship with my mother, and
Yeah,
going into writing the book, I think I thought, like, I'm going to see and then I just saw her as this I began to see her as this woman in the '70s who was stuck in this place that maybe, she did even more the generation before us did even more than we did in, like, let's do what they told us to do, especially as a woman, you got married
yeah,
because that's what you were supposed to. If you didn't get married, then there was something wrong, and if you didn't
right.
have children, there was something wrong. So this poor woman, part of her complex story was, she's living in upper middle class America. So what could possibly go wrong? I mean, she was living the dream,
Yeah,
completely. And she had a Ford LTD 2 door. I mean, this was a great situation for her, but she never achieved, she never I don't think she was ever really proud of herself. She never had that opportunity to really accept herself for who she was because she was so closed in by these expectations, and her life
mhm,
had always been defined by a man. Where I, even, being born in the late '60s, my experience was totally different. And I think she ensured that I had a different experience than she did. Only I couldn't see that. I couldn't see any
yeah,
until I looked at her as another, as a 'cause in the book, I look at her as a contemporary as opposed to a mother, and I was like, "Oh my god, she was just trying to survive this whole thing," and what happened,
wow,
happened,
yeah,
and that doesn't change, and what you said earlier, you know, being honest about what happened is super powerful, and then sharing it is powerful
mhm,
because then you're like,
yeah,
"Well, now I'm gonna have to own it. This is my truth, and I'm gonna have to
yes,
own it." But as far as mom and
yeah,
and I, I think, for me, it just opened up my mind to maybe more what her experience really was as opposed to my perception. Because 'cause I'm still her daughter, those things still happened. But
yeah, of
seeing her
course,
side of the story, was
yep,
hugely powerful. And now I look at her more like she was a rock star. She was flawed, and it was messed up,
yeah,
but she
yep.
was a rock star, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So then bring that back to you. So after you wrote the book and shared that with the world, how did that translate to who you became after that? How did that move you and your work forward beyond that first book?
Oh, well, I think that first of all, when you publish a memoir-esque book, and this again sounds
Yeah.
so like easy, but when that goes into print and you can't change it, I mean, like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do now? So there's that courage to do it. Maybe you didn't even have the courage, you just thought you did, and you didn't understand the reality of putting it out there. But then it's
Yeah.
owning your past and your truth and your version of your truth and owning that. So
Yes.
that's super powerful because then it's like, okay, this is who I am. I'm messy.
Right.
And accepting the
Yep.
fact that we're messy. And I think as women, that's even harder because you don't want to be you don't want to be perceived as messy, maybe. And so I'm
Yeah.
messy. I didn't get it all right. And that's fine. I'm gonna live with that known, and I think that is a process that is so powerful and painful all at the same time. And I think the other thing for me, Megan, was I went when I sat down to write that book, I looked at my child self and I thought, oh my god! Because I saw this video when I was writing of myself, like, hopping around in the '70s, like, getting in everybody's personal space. I should have been on ADHD medicine or something. Had the bowl cut working, it was
Yep.
a scene. I was like, "I have to get away from her." And then by the end, I was like, "Oh my god, please tell me I can honor her for the rest of my life. Please tell me that I will be
Oh,
more like her than me, because I lived a lot of the
yeah.
best parts of us alive." And that is transformative and life-changing if I could live like Lil Amy for the rest of my life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm getting goosebumps. As you mentioned, I shared with you that I just finished the first draft of my memoir and I have it with beta readers now. And so similar for me. I thought I was writing about my story and my viewpoint of my becoming, but it really grew into a kind of an homage to both my mom and my daughter and wanting, and all the things I thought of as flawed and the things that she broke in me, really seeing her as this woman trying to do her best just as she loved me just as I love my daughter, and being able to carry that forward, and be inspired by somebody that I used to think is so flawed has just been a life-changing experience.
Wow.
So for you, that it's powerful, isn't it? Just
Oh,
I keep
it's
saying
yeah.
to people, just do this exercise, even if you don't want to share it with people. Like going through the exercise of writing your life story. I don't know how you don't grow from that.
Right, and that's what's been amazing to me. Probably the biggest surprise of that first book is that I've had so many readers tell me, and it's just an obvious thing to do when you think about that storyline. You will immediately put yourself in the main character's shoes. You will immediately look back at your own childhood. I have my son is
Yeah,
28, and he said he did it. He immediately put himself like, what would I do in this situation? And it's been
yeah,
such a cathartic exercise for so many. And the book is very
yeah,
funny too, and so
yeah, yeah.
it's a good mix of those
It's
things, and
good.
I'm not touting my own work, I'm saying I didn't understand that I was gonna connect the reader with a process that might be, like a very helpful tool, and for that, I am so
Yes,
proud, humbled and
yes.
proud, and especially since I didn't intend to do that, which makes it even better.
Yes, yeah, I shared with you, I can't wait to read your work, and what you're describing to me doesn't sound like touting your work at all, it just sounds so relatable. Like, to me, what you're describing is just putting to paper the human experience, and I think that that is so powerful, especially in this moment in time. I wanna hear about your letter writing, and so maybe we'll shift to hearing more about that, but I think that your style of writing and putting these words out in the world. To me, I keep thinking that where we're at in the moment in time is that we just need to get back to the basics of humanity and see
Right.
people as humans. And I feel like your work is doing that. So that's when I read about your story. That's kind of what I took from your work is just the mix of humor and imperfection and flaws and growth. And it's just to me, it's very human. So talk to us a little bit about, your is it your next book, Dear Dana?
Mhm, that's my 2nd book,
Yeah,
and that was
yeah,
unlike something I conjured up. This was a story that just happened to me, and I'd like to tell people I was minding my own business because I did. It was a non-intentional, um, journey to be sure, but basically, I was on minding my own business. I was on Facebook one day, and I worked at this summer camp, like, decades ago in the late '80s, and I had a friend there. Her name was Dana, and we were both loud and thought we were funny, and we spent 6 weeks together. And you know how you have a friend or a acquaintance that comes into your life very briefly, and then you just remember them every once in a while. Their name just pops back in your head.
yeah,
You're like, "Oh,
yep,
whatever happened to Dana?" We had no contact
yes.
for 35 years probably. Then I'm on
Whoa,
Facebook, and it was very innocent. I was like, "Oh, Dana." I look her up, there she is. I look through her life, and I've realized she's overachieved in children. She has 5 children, 4 girls, the youngest is the only boy, and he, is battling cancer. Right away, I figure that out, and he's at St. Jude in Memphis, so that means it's serious. So, immediately, as a human being, as a mom, I became, interested in her story and following along with it, and so then he goes into remission, and then the cancer comes back, and, does this she's very honest, and she does this post that's almost grateful about the cancer coming back, and it was really kinda mesmerizing, and so I sit down at my desk the next morning, it's literally like a lightning bolt hit me in the head, and I'm like, "You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start writing them handwritten notes and send them to the Ronald McDonald House." I still had not had any direct contact with her, and I didn't even hit like or comment on her post because I felt like that was disingenuous, like, here's this woman helping her
oh,
son battle cancer, I mean,
yep,
what does that mean?
yes, yes, right,
And
it's
so
so
I didn't
true.
even do that. I had never met the kid, and I hadn't written anyone a handwritten note in decades. So it's not like I came into this being, "I'm gonna be the letter writing lady,"
Right,
you know, and
yes,
and the and the story's also a great testament to how, like you were talking about shifting gears in life sometimes, that I just took a chance on this idea I had, and it just blew up to be, like, the biggest thing in my life. I had no idea all the
yeah,
rest of what was gonna happen was gonna happen. So I write the 2 of them blindly for like 10 to 14 weeks saying, "I'm thinking of you, I'm praying for you," like whatever, whatever you'd say in that card
yes,
to the kid and Dana. And so you could see her post start to shift in these months, or couple months. And I was like, "Oh, this isn't good." And, you
mm,
know, Parker passes away at 15 years
mm,
old, and there's no good words for that.
no,
And I was
no,
rock
no,
solid sure it had nothing
mm,
to do with me, but I was like, "What do I do next?" Because I was like, I just
right,
wrote her all these words of support, so I can't just turn that valve off, right? And
right,
so
yep,
but I don't know where she lives really, because this is Facebook. I don't wanna message her and ask her for her address, so I'm like, "Okay." you're crazy. So why don't you look up her husband's address? Cause he's an attorney. And so I just start sending
Yeah.
the weekly letters there because I can't stop myself.
Oh,
And so
wow.
so I write her knowing that I'm crazy the whole time, and then the
Yeah,
letters get
yeah.
longer and longer. Because what am I gonna say? Well, then
Oof.
I just start talking about my life because I don't have
Yeah.
anything else to say, and I don't know what to say about grief, so I don't really get into that. I'm just like, "That this
Mhm.
is horrible. I'm sorry. We're supporting you." And and then magically, after about 5 months, and I really got to the point where I was like, "I can't write her anymore because it's not doing any good." Clearly. Not because she hadn't responded to me, but what good can this really do? She's lost her son. That's like worst case scenario. But then she starts writing me back. And
Oh.
so,
Mm.
we start exchanging. This kicks off like 2 years of us just exclusively writing each other, like exchanging words to the US mail.
Wow.
We don't text, we don't email, we don't call, we don't do anything. And it created this space between the two of us where we could say whatever we wanted. I didn't know when or if she was reading my words. She had no idea when I read anything. We didn't feel like we had to respond to anything specific. And then we started trusting each other. And it was so beautiful because we would say stuff like, I've never really told anybody this before, but I know I can tell you. And she would share about her grief because I was safe.
Mm.
And the best part,
Yes.
Megan, is I had no idea how she voted. I didn't know what she
Uh-huh.
believed
Oh,
in.
yeah, see, of
I
course, yeah.
I didn't know how she stood
Yeah.
on any issue, and you know what I cared about? None of it. Because here was
Yeah.
my friend from 35 years ago who lost her son, and that was the entire focus, and she had told me things, and I had told her things that was the last thing that mattered. And it was so
Yeah.
transformative that I was like, "You know what? If all this good, like the lens of my eyes and my heart changed from this one girl from Louisiana, what about the other hundreds of people that I supposedly know on this list of Facebook friends?" And I was like, "Okay, let's really take it up another level." And I
Mhm.
was like, "I think I can try to write all these people a handwritten letter." So, and I didn't really think I was gonna finish. I thought it was a good social experiment. But once I got to about letter 30, I was like, this is gonna be the most important thing I've ever done in my life." I started to
Oh.
see it. And so it took me 18 months and I wrote almost 600 handwritten letters, and it blew up my life to the point now that I prance around and speak about handwritten notes. And it's important not to get stuck on the word letter because this can be done in 2 sentences. And the amount of hope and moving the needle on people being seen and valued, and the amount of caring about how someone voted or how somebody does or doesn't believe just got it still mattered, but it just completely dissipated in light of real human connection.
Yes, what I love about your comment of that it could just be the 1 or 2 sentences,
Right.
that, when you say letter, that it doesn't have to be this daunting, especially for
No.
the first reach out, but to me, it's such a beautiful invitation to somebody else to then give back what they're wanting or needing to give back in that moment, and so,
Right.
or and it doesn't require a response, it's like kind of
It's
it's an invitation for them to do what they need with the moment.
Right, and if it's just a gift of they receive it and nothing happens, that's beautiful because
Yeah,
it's non-intrusive and it's not in your
correct.
hand where they know where that you read it. You have no idea if it
Yeah,
got there or not, and so you're just giving them a gift of hope. And the other thing about it that's so compelling instantaneous communication is so necessary in what we do. You and I would not be having this lovely connection without instantaneous communication. But
yeah,
it makes us there's something that doesn't work, like, in our humanness, that doesn't resonate correctly. But what a letter or a note does, especially if it's been mailed, there's this moment that people have at the mailbox. I call it the magic at the mailbox. And here's what happened.
yeah,
Let's say you and I went to high school together, and let's say you just randomly send me a note that says something sincere but brief, specific, because that's the best
yes,
practice. And I go to
yes.
my mailbox before I've even opened it, and think about going to your mailbox. What do we see in our mailboxes? We all see the same thing. This is
Oh,
a universal thing.
bills and junk
Lots of
mail,
junk,
and,
yeah,
as an
and they
adult, it's nothing good. Yeah.
no, and they even try to make it look handwritten so you'll get excited.
Yes. Oh, those are the worst. Those make me
Right.
the most mad.
But I go to my mailbox and here's this thing from Megan
Yeah.
in high school, and I'm
Yes.
holding
Oh,
in my hand what Megan held in her hand.
yeah.
It's tactile. tactile. And then
Yes.
I'm like, "Oh god,"
Yeah.
and immediately people connect the dots, and I have so much experience with this. So I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Megan had to get paper and a pen. She had to get a
Mhm.
card. She had to get an envelope. Wait, did Megan call my mother to get my address? You know, my mother might not even know my address. How did she get it? Then she had to get a stamp. Then she had to drive
Yeah.
across town and mail it. And in my hand, I'm holding this thing that lets me know, here's how much I matter to another human being. Boom.
Mm.
And in this world of isolation, because that's kind of where we're at,
Yeah.
that reaching the hand across whatever the abyss is means more to people. The number one response I got from those 600 letters was this: I will save your letter or note in a special place for the rest of my life. And
Aw, like that's wow.
and here's the thing, Megan, I had that power. I didn't know I had it. But we have that
Yeah.
power and you have that power, whoever's listening, because
Mhm.
it is a little simple tool in our little human toolkits that we all already have. And you don't have to be a
Mm.
writer and you don't have to be wordy. You just have to have a human heart and about 80 cents now because the post office continues to
Yeah.
upcharge my letters.
Yes, yes, and I think the other takeaway that I hear in your story is how much you are following that little inner voice inside on what action you're going to take. You know, like maybe when you wrote that first letter to Dana, it kind of felt like it didn't make sense almost to you, but it's just you
100%.
kind of like you were getting this calling to do it. Yeah. And so I think for our listeners too, whether it's them writing a letter, because this particular story is resonating, or just trying to think of what does your gut say you should do right now next, and you don't have to solve the bigger, like, I think I keep coming back to that with your story, that those little seeds you're planting, looking back at your past for the first book, sending the first letter for Dana, you're doing that first step, and then your life's purpose builds from those little actions that you take.
Right, and I think that is so powerful, and I think it's more powerful than the note writing. It's more powerful than anything is that we all have these ideas. We all have these notions, and they're unique to us. If we could
Yeah.
just trust our own selves and wade through
Yes.
our own crap enough to believe, enough to take one step forward, I believe the whole world would just be transformed by that. And if we could be the
Yes.
friend who supports that, the friend who says, "Hell yeah, let's go,"
Yes,
"Let's
yes.
go," then we would literally change the world. Because if you think about, like, my idea to write a letter or to write a note, how would that even move the needle on anything? But it did, and I
Yes.
didn't even mean for it to
Yeah.
do so. If we could all just believe enough to take one step forward, I really believe we would be transformed, the world would be transformed.
Yes, yes. So from there, how did that, and I'll bring it back to you and your journey, as you get all of that abundance of love back and reception and hearing what this did for people, what lessons did you gain about kind of the human experience, and just kind of what your purpose on this path is?
Right, and it was life-changing because there were so many lessons in it from, you know, such powerful things that you don't it's never too late to reach out to another human being and you tell them you care. Because I got caught up a
Yep.
lot in I found out that one friend from high school was in the towers on 911, and so I'm
Mm,
writing these letters 20 years after 911. I remember sitting over that note or letter and thinking, I can't really say, can I? Because, one of the great things about this whole project was I had to sit down and look at everyone individually. And so I found
mm,
out a lot of these people were rock stars. Rock
yeah.
stars who had
Yes.
experienced trauma and who experienced, things that I didn't know about. But this girl in particular, I was like, I cannot seriously say I'm sorry you went through that. But you know what? I can. And it doesn't matter that it
Mm,
was 20 years. She wrote me back that it meant so much to her that someone from high school would recognize that, especially
um,
after the fact. So it is never ever too late
yes.
to tell someone that you care about them, that you apologize for something you messed up, that you're congratulating them, that you're sorry for something that they went through that you didn't know about. Because a lot of the intel I got from my light stalking was stuff I just
Yeah.
didn't know about because I didn't
Yeah.
Facebook doesn't present social media doesn't present people as individuals. And
I
taking that 15 minutes to go look, I'm like, let's say I would have looked at your profile. Let's say we went to high school,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and then I
Yeah.
went on your website, and I'm like, oh my God, she is making a difference. She is making difference, and she's experienced trauma as all the way from babyhood to now that I knew nothing about. And so I can say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I am sorry I did not know that. I'm sorry you went through that, but look at what you've done. You are transforming people through your work." And I can say that. And then, wait, I want to say something else because when I was in high school, you talked me down when Larry broke up with me and when we're standing next to the payphone, and you're like, "Hey, Amy,
Yeah.
that's not going to define your life. You're going to have better
Mm.
relationships." So you did what you do now, but you did it in high school, only none of us realized that that's what was going on. And so the best part of the whole letter is I'm like, "Hey, Megan, thank you. You made a
Yeah,
difference for me,
it
and
is.
I never got to tell you that." And so, guys, think about not just receiving that letter, but think about what it would feel like to write it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mic
Oh,
drop.
yes. Mic drop. Yeah, it's so funny as you're describing that. Since I've started doing the podcast, really the most rewarding messages I've gotten have been people from high school. People that, some were my closest friends, some were acquaintances that I only had one class with. I mean, it's been just, you name it, it's across the gamut. And those messages, and I even ended up having a friend from high school on the show a couple months back. Just it's like we had no idea our shared trauma experiences. Of course, when we were sitting in math class together, we had no idea that both of
Yeah,
us had such a shared experience. And so connecting as an adult to people from your past is just another blessing. I mean, it's
right.
really an incredible feeling. So yeah, hands down, love it.
Well, and it makes me think too about it like ties into what we talked about memoir writing, the value of
Yeah,
sharing our real story because the value of you sharing that boldly on your website, means that you've touched me, and I don't even know you, but you've touched your high
right.
school friend and that power in
Yeah,
being vulnerable, like in a letter, not in a letter,
yeah,
however you want to frame that in a
yeah,
memoir,
yeah,
just out loud or
yeah.
however you do it. The value in that is that you're going to help someone else. You're going to make someone
Yep.
else not feel alone, which I think you said that at the beginning of this conversation. You're going to take that person by the hand, mentally and spiritually, whether you think you are or not. Emotionally might be a better word.
Yeah, I'm thinking of you going through your 600 friends, and identifying when to write letters, and the folks that you mentioned some people you just hadn't seen in so long, but what about people where there's a level of friction? There's a silence for a reason. Maybe there was a falling out or just some type of tension. The people that you see their name and it's just a little bit of a cringe because there's a break there. What does writing to those kind of people, do for you as well as them in kind of taking that courageous leap?
Right, and I think that was really difficult for me because 'cause I'm a people pleaser, so I was like, "What do I do? What do I do with that?" And I found
Yeah.
my best tract was just to be honest, and not honest in 2,000 words, but honest in 1 sentence, like,
Yeah.
I wrote to
Yep.
3 people who I fired in a manager position, and I was like, "Hey,
Yep.
that was difficult, I wanna let you know as a human that impacted me for every year
Mm.
since that happened, and I'm sorry it ended up
Mm.
that way, and I'm sorry for my part in it." I did
Mm.
apologizing, and then I tried to do, like, recognizing, like, really think about what's my part in this friction, and just say, "Hey, look, just so I care about you regardless of all that. I care about you regardless of the friction between us or the difference between us. Like our connection is more important to that to me. I understand that that's real, but please know you don't have to write me back, but please know that I still care about you." And I think that that's such a powerful thing. I wrote to one girl from high school who I knew we were opposites on like everything, religion, politics, and everything. And in that letter, I was like, and she was one of those people who presented her case well, that I was like, "I just want you to know I think you're brave," because of the suburban box we grew up in, and I didn't agree with every one of your posts, so I was honest about that, but I do respect you for putting yourself out there, and I want you to know that us
Mm.
staying connected is how I think change really happens. Because I feel like you listen to me, I listen to you, and the bottom line is we care about each other, and I think it's good we have this
Yeah.
connection despite our really big differences." And she wrote me back and told me that my letter filled her with so much hope and optimism.
Mm. Wow, that's beautiful. What about, maybe if that didn't land that way? Yeah,
Right.
so, thinking of when reconciliation doesn't work and the other person isn't ready to feel
Right.
positive about hearing from you, what are your thoughts on, how do you navigate that, and what should your takeaway be when things don't end up how you maybe hoped they would?
Well, I think that's just and one big another big lesson was in human relating, it's messy. Like human relating is
Mm,
not going
yeah.
to all work out the way it was supposed to be. Now, I was pretty
Yeah.
lucky in that I only got a couple negative, truly negative responses or
Yeah.
outcomes. And I think that's because the letters, I think the tone of the letters was out of goodwill. So I don't think I
Yeah.
wasn't attacked, but I do think there are people who did not like it, they just did not tell me. That's what I've come to
Yeah,
believe,
yeah,
like,
yeah. Yes.
they
Yeah,
didn't reach
yeah.
out, and I may have heard something from someone else about a negative,
Yep.
like, they didn't like you said, it didn't land, is the right words for it. It
Yeah.
didn't land, but
Yeah.
I only had a couple instances where people reached out and notified me that it didn't land, and I think that's because,
Yeah.
the act of the letter, because I think the tactile meaning that they got something probably overrode the fact that they felt like they needed to rebut, and I tried not to be, uh, like, there wasn't any conflict-oriented language. Because that really
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh, of
the
course.
that wasn't the tone of the project, and I didn't try to use it to resolve anything, but my response rate was, like, close to 70%, and I guarantee you some of those 30%, it didn't receive it well, and that's
Yeah.
fine because that's
Yeah.
and
Of
I had people
course.
say stuff to me in
That's
response
human.
that surprised me, like, there was a
Yes.
girl who I worked at summer camp with, and she was beautiful and had all her junk together, and I did not, and I had a bad perm. I mean, it's a long story, but she was like, "I always thought you didn't like me," and I was intimidated by
Mm.
her, and it's amazing because
Mm.
her honesty, again, really helped me see myself differently.
Yes. Oh, that's huge. Yeah, I'm thinking of when my husband and I first got married. We are both blended families, so we had first marriages, and in those early days of tension and stuff, we got to a point where we both agreed that if we have a message that is in our heart to be said, that we're going to share it with the other parent, regardless of what their reaction is. It's like you follow your heart and your heart and your truth, and the outcome really is kind of none of your business. It's like it's like you put the good out in the world that you believe in, and not everybody's gonna buy what you're selling, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't put your heart out there.
Well, see, that's such a powerful lesson, I
Yeah,
think. I mean,
that's you
yes,
already
in
part
relating and marriage and close
yeah,
relationships, but also just generally in your truth is putting it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the part of the transaction that we can
Yeah.
control. And nothing else we can
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
but are we gonna sacrifice the direct goodness that's gonna come from putting it
That's
out
right.
there because we're scared, and
Yeah.
we're all scared to differing degrees. And if we say we're not scared, I just think some of us
Yeah.
are bolder and less scared, but I think we all stay awake at night probably about things we shouldn't. So,
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think the one for me that was the hardest trying to think through was I was estranged from the father that raised me, and he ended up passing away a few years back, and so that estrangement we never healed, and was just curious of your perspective on estrangement and boundaries. How do you kind of honor the boundaries to protect yourself while also maybe having the courage to break through that silence? Do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, I think just from the approach of note and letter
bigyan mo
writing,
sa
because
milk,
that's,
soup.
that's the I was there was people who I don't know if I don't know, estranged, I don't know, that might be a
Yeah.
hard word, but I'm so glad because obviously people have passed away who got
Yeah, of
letters,
course.
and I'm
Yes,
so glad
yes.
that I did reach out, but I think it's super important where
Yeah,
boundaries
then
are
we
concerned to
are
not
sitting
say
quickly
something
on the
in a
same
letter or in
purposes.
any context that you don't really mean, and that's one major takeaway from this project, because as a
Mhm.
people pleaser, and someone who likes to write, I mean, it was easy to say flowery things, but I realized when you say things like that 600 times, you have to mean what you say. And it's
Yes,
and it's
yeah.
okay to be honest with with love and
Yeah,
grace, tied into that, but to keep
exactly.
boundaries and not say stuff that you
And
don't
some
truly
TVs,
believe, just to make the other person
Yeah.
feel good. I know that again sounds simple, but I don't really think it's that simple, but to stay true
Yeah.
to the truth, and
Yeah.
to still navigate in love while staying in the truth, and then
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
choosing not to do that if that's not a
Yeah.
healthy decision for you to make. And I think that choice is fine too. And there were people
Yeah.
ask me all the time, were there people you didn't write to? Yes. Yes, because I
Mhm.
didn't feel comfortable. Because my goal was to write
Yep.
everyone, but I didn't feel like it
Yeah.
was a healthy thing for me. And that's back to your example of a relationship or a thing that wasn't healthy for you personally, that wasn't going to gain
Yeah.
anything.
Yep, yep, and I do feel good for my relationship with my dad, I did physically keep that boundary intact, but there was and he consistently sent a birthday card to myself and my daughter every single year. We got birthday cards, I would say thank you for those in a message to him, and then eventually I did send him, a written message just saying, that I do forgive him, that I knew he was imperfect, that I do love him from afar. It's just having him in directly in our life yet wasn't a positive thing, and so if it did feel good to at least speak my truth and get those said to him, while also saying I wished he would have taken accountability over the years, but I knew he couldn't. So it's
Right.
just I think just, like, putting it to rest, but in a loving way was what worked for me.
Well, and that's but you just I mean, that example says so much about boundaries, about being true to yourself, but also,
Yeah.
acknowledging that he only had control over what he had over control, but you still got to
Yeah.
say those things, and I think
Yeah.
saying them, especially with the handwritten word, the Journal of
Yes.
Psychology and Psychiatry did this study, and they said that when you handwrite, even if you're just journaling, not directing the other person,
Yeah.
you're not directing it towards another person specifically, that there's a 20% increase in emotional clarity and a 20% decrease in stress just by
Mm.
writing as opposed to
Reading it.
typing or yeah. And so,
Yeah.
but that I'm sure it was cathartic to have written that note in
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
context you
Definitely
wrote it
was.
in.
Yep, yep, very much. So these next questions are part of a segment I call Rapid Reel, just a few little lighter, get to know you kind of questions. And the first one is a favorite book of somebody else's that impacted your journey.
Oh, I have so many favorite books.
Yeah.
Recently the Kristen Hanna, I like history and she writes about
Yes.
history, but she wrote one called The Women, and it's
Mm.
such a powerful testament. It's women in another, like the World War II setting, but and then she
Yeah.
wrote another one about Vietnam, but it's so powerful, the context of women, like talking about my mother, how in different eras we forget how they struggled, but the gifts we have as women and as and again, doing something outside of one was a spy and one was a nurse in Vietnam, but the power in continuing to push and to decide that this is the idea in our head, this is what we're going to do no matter what. And I think that's just so
Yes.
inspiring, especially when you see it in real time, over history, even though they're historical fiction. I mean, they read like
Yeah.
nonfiction.
Yeah. Very cool. Um, is there a letter that stands out that you are most proud to have sent?
Oh boy, that's tough. That that's really tough, and when I wrote the book, I went and reread all the letters that I
Yeah.
received, and I had photocopied the ones I wrote because I realized from writing Dana for 2 years that I wasn't gonna remember what I said. I didn't intend to write a book.
Yes.
I got about
Yeah.
75% through the project, and I realized that it was a story worth sharing, but in rereading those letters, really I mean, as a individual, I think the personal, like, the people, especially, like, aunts and uncles who I'm close to, sister-in-laws, that those things we never say, that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. I wrote
Mm.
my
Yeah.
husband's brother's wife, and when you get married, you
Mm.
don't realize that these people are
Yes.
going to be all
Yeah.
up in your business for the long term.
Yep.
No one
Yep.
told us that our people were gonna look like those people. No one told us any of the
It's
things,
so
but
true.
I
Oh,
but I
yeah.
wrote her and we're very different people. We have
Yeah.
different approaches to life, but I have so much respect for her, and I was like, basically, "Look, I didn't realize when we were 23 that you were going to be a person that had such a profound impact on my life, and I'm so glad it was you. Like, we're not gonna, like,
Mm,
talk every day on the phone or even once a month, but I can count on you. My kids can count on you. I can sit next to you in a total storm of, like, drama, and I can count on you to have not just my back, but I like, you're a solid. Like, we married into this thing,
yes.
but thank you, and I'm so glad it was you and not some other person. And I know
Oh,
she
I love
said,
that.
and, like, we're not close that way. She was like, "I cried like a little girl when I read it." I'm so proud that, and it's just such a great, it was such a great opportunity to say the things, because I went from thinking I don't know what I'm going to say, to being like, "Oh my god, I have so much to say. I can't stop."
Um, last one of these is, we've talked a lot about how much I think you're tapped into your inner voice and following those nudges and doing what it's telling you to do next. Do you have any routines or things to ground you? Do you have any either morning rituals or things before bedtime to help you, kind of stay connected to your intuition?
Right, I do pray, I'm a prayer, and that has,
Yeah,
that,
of course.
morning and evening is a big deal for me, because I think it's an exercise in gratitude and perspective. But to me,
Yeah.
I write somebody a handwritten note, not letter, every single
Yep.
morning, and I keep this notebook by my desk, and it's got, like, tabs. It's like, "Support," "Thank you," "Congratulations," "Sympathy." And so I have a stack of like, little note cards, and then I just pull that open if I see somebody on Facebook or in real life who I see has, fits one of those categories. When I just open it up and I'm like, "Oh," and it's, like, literally, like, 3 lines, like, "Dear Megan, you know, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear
Yeah.
about your dad passing away. I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. I love you, Amy." And
Yep.
that one act every morning, and the hilarious thing is I have to talk myself into doing it. Like, I'm the most bought in person I've ever met. But I have to talk myself into doing it, because 'cause I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I doing this?"
Of
That's the
course.
best 15
Yeah.
15 minutes of my day, and that practice before I get started with everything else is always like, "Okay, now I'm 0 focused on this is what I'm gonna do," and it makes me listen to my inner voice,
Mm.
because that all started with my inner voice, and
Yep.
it honors that, and it just puts perspective on everything for me.
I love that. I love asking that question because of the diversity of answers that we get, and it's
Right.
I want our listeners to realize that whatever works for you, and we don't, it's, you see, yeah, go for a walk or meditate, and it feels like, I don't know if that really does it for me, and
Right,
so it's
no.
what works for you, what works for you. So I love that. That's
But I
great.
also think it makes you ask yourself, because I listened to a couple of your
Yeah.
episodes, so,
Yeah.
it makes you reexamine yourself, and then also you could be
Right.
inspired by what something
Of
else too, because
course.
that's what I always find, like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
that's interesting."
Same. I love that. All right, before we get to the last question, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to add? And then also, how can folks connect with you and your work?
Right. I think that I'm not I just would reemphasize that if you have an idea in your head that sounds ridiculous, I say go
Yep.
for it. I say surround
Mhm.
yourself with people who say go for it. And if you just
Yeah.
trust yourself enough to take one step forward, I just think that's the value in my stories. That's the bigger message in a lot of stories, is that
Yep.
I just like to reemphasize that. And you can find me at my website is amydaughters.com, and you can message me, you can email me, the socials are on there, my stories on there. But if anybody wants to contact me, I would love to discuss further anything I've said or ideas you have or encouragement, both ways. And the best thing is my mailing address is on there. And I would love if you wanted to write me a note, I 100% will write you back.
That's incredible. And we will share all of that and your mailing address when we put the description out. So I love that. That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Amy. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like I could talk to you all day. There's so much I resonated in your wisdom and your experiences. So thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, yeah, you can't control how truth is received, but you can control how honestly you live. Passing it on doesn't mean fixing others. It means freeing yourself. Until next time, stay messy. Thank you for joining us.